Good afternoon, welcome to our third installment of our German specialty six-packs. My name is Raymond Vlug and I work here at Frankford Hall, and I've secured this specialty six-pack together for a little bit of a spring summery six-pack. We got 3 ales and 3 lagers, and basically all these beers are specially imported from Germany. They're pretty hard to come by, and a lot of them have some significant historic value, and we'll dive into that a little bit more when we get into the beer. Here we have here today is brewed by Apostebrau. It's a brewery that's been established in 1890. I guess in the grand scheme of things, it's one of the newer breweries in Germany, hard to believe. And this is they call it the Rustic Bavarian Cesan. If you're familiar with saisons, I'm sure you know that saisons are mostly brewed in Belgium, some in France. This is a different variation of it. As this brewery started in about the late 80s, they started to revive some older grains that used to be brewed, such as like emmer, spelt, and einkorn, which is a variety of wheat malt. And they're roasted to a slight degree, but the saisons are meant to be like a lighter, summer, bubbly beer. And this one it's got a nice, like, kind of a rye character to it. It's still very bubbly, easy to drink. You'll notice some citrus flavors in there as well. Obviously it's just called Rustic because of there's a little bit of different variety of flavor that you really don't catch in your Belgian saisons that tend to be a lot lighter as well. Brewery has been owned by the same family since the 1890s, and when they started using these old grains back in the 80s, they were ridiculed by a lot of master breweries, but after some years they came around and noticed that you can brew beer with these different types of grains, and it really put this brewery back on the map. Next up, we have the Lemke budike himbeer Berliner Weiss. Say that 5 times fast. This is a relatively new established beer, but I wanted to include this because the owner, master brewer, have spent years researching the old Berliner Weiss style and wanted to revive the style the way it was traditionally brewed. And after years of studying and hundreds of test brews, they came out with this Berliner Weiss. Berliner Weiss traditionally were created back around the Middle Ages. And it's a very low alcohol, easy drinking beer, and it was meant for folk to drink throughout the entire day because they didn't realize that boiling for beer kills all the bacteria, and in those days they thought, especially in the larger towns and cities, that water was unsafe to drink and people get sick from it. So they created a very low alcoholic beer so they could not get too drunk throughout the work days. Berliner Weiss is also coined by Napoleon as the champagne of beers. This was back in the 1800s when Napoleon invaded Berlin, and he was basically stuck wherever he went, drinking the local stuff. And because of its light, bubbly, slightly sour characteristics, it reminded him a lot of champagne, so he coined this beer as the champagne of beers. He did find the beer to be too sour for him at times, and the story goes that he sent a soldier on an errand to find something to help him cut the tartness of these beers, and they created 2 different syrups, a woodruff and a himbeer. Woodruff is an herbal syrup. If you ever go to like a German beer hall, they'll notice that they serve, you can drop into your beer at your discretion of how much of it to cut the tartness. That one gives a little bit of like a marshmallowy flavor to it. And then himbeer translates to raspberry in German. So you also have a raspberry syrup they serve on the side with Berliner Weiss. This brewery decided to brew the beer with the raspberry added during the fermentation process. So it's a raspberry Berliner Weiss. Budike, the term, is derived from a Berlin-style slang that comes from French that describes a small corner pub. Again, this is a very low alcohol, about 3%, easy to drink, lightly sour and fruity. It's a wonderful summer beverage, and we will have some Berliner Weisses on our list here at Frankfurt Hall as well. Next up, this is the last of the ales. This is the Schlenkeler Weitzenbach. The Plank Brewery has been in existence since 1617 and has been owned by the same family since then. Right now it's on the 16th generation of Michael Plank as owner brewmaster. They were named best small brewery in the world twice over the last few years, with this particular beer having won 7 gold medal awards. A Heller Weitzenbach, it loosely translates Heller to light, as in it's a light colored beer. Weizen meaning wheat, and Bock is a term that Germans use to describe stronger alcoholic beers. So it's a light colored wheat beer with higher alcohol. Very light, refreshing to drink. It's got awesome carbonation, and you can see the carbonation bubbling here in the glass. Wonderful banana citrus undertone. To classify as a wheat beer, at least half of that wheat or the malt bill has to be the wheat grain. It's also brewed with ale yeast, and again, the ale yeast is a little bit more turbulent, a little bit more viscosity in the beer, and brings a lot more carbonation to the beer as well. This is a great transitional beer from winter to summer, as it's still got like that boozy character to it, but it's also light and easy to drink. All right, so now on to the lager portion of our six-pack. This is the St. Georgian Brau Butenheimer Hopfenzupfer, another one, word stumbler. Small brewery, founded in 1624 near Bamberg in Germany, of course. This is a Märzen-style beer, and Märzens are kind of your forerunner of the Oktoberfest beer. I'll try to keep it brief, but Oktoberfest was started back in 1800s, 1810 to be exact, as a wedding celebration. And the way the German brewing cycles worked back in those days, it was they brewed a lot of beers in the fall time. You couldn't really brew beer in the summer or the winter because the temperatures were so off that yeast wouldn't survive and you just couldn't brew beer. So what the Germans and a lot of other European countries as well did is they brewed a boatload of beer in the springtime, and they would store those beers in their cellars and caves, anywhere where it was relatively temperature controlled, and so they would have enough beer to drink through the summer periods. So this wedding celebration happened in October, first week of October, and after years and years of re-celebrating this wedding, they we're basically using these Märzen beers, or Märzen translates to March beers, to drink throughout this particular festival. And the 6 breweries that were within the city limits of Munich, where the festival is held, came together and were basically the 6 featured fest beers or Märzen beers at this festival. And then they changed the term from Märzen to Oktoberfest beer. So technically, by German law, there is only 6 breweries that can call their beers actual Oktoberfest beer. And again, they're all within the city limits of Munich, and they're all featured at this festival itself. So any brewery outside of Munich that makes a Märzen style or fest beer style, they cannot call it Oktoberfest. Obviously, here in the United States, the land of the free, we'll call it Oktoberfest whenever we want. We don't have to abide by those German rules. So this is a Märzen beers. It's a light lager. Originally it started, Märzens were light amber colored lagers, and then back in like I think it was like the late 1900s, the festival was growing in popularity, and they wanted to attract more tourists that were now starting to get used to the lighter colored beer, so they changed the color from amber to blonde to be more appealing for your average beer drinker. So nowadays when you go to Munich to the festival, you'll serve blonde colored Oktoberfest lagers. There are still some of those breweries, such as Planer and Hofbräu, that actually make 2 Oktoberfest beers, one Märzen style, which is amber colored, and then one blonde style, which they serve at the festival these days. This is a small time brewery. It's called Hopfenzupfer, which means seeking hops, and that's in a sense meant to highlight that the hops that are used to brew this beer are all harvested from their own brewery grounds. Very light, easy to drink, got a nice balance of like some caramel sweetness with hop bitterness. Oktoberfest beers tend to be a little bit higher in alcohol than your average lager. They run at about 5.5 to 6.5%, where your average beer run about to 4.5 to 5.5%. Yeah, great style, and it's a wonderful beer to have any time of day during March time. All right, one of my favorite breweries. This is Einbecker, a brewery that was established in 1378. One of the oldest breweries in the world. Most oldest breweries in the world are German. The oldest brewery in the world is Weitzenbach. They were founded in 1040. We have several of their beers on draft here. Einbecker is known for their Bock beers. They proclaim themselves that there wouldn't be any Bock beer if it wasn't for Einbecker. And this is their Mai Urbach. Mai as it translates to May, as in the spring season. Means it's kind of a slang term for original, as they are the creators of the Bock beer. And again, Bock just is a description for stronger, high alcoholic beers. It's a little bit lighter and bubblier than its like fall winter cousin that are a lot boozier. So it's kind of a transition beer from your strong, high alcoholic, dark winter beers to your lighter, summery beers. It's got a wonderful carbonation, beautiful caramel undertones, still drinks light and easy, and it's one of my favorite beers. And it's about most Bock beers run at about 6.5% and higher. This leans right under that percentage, and it's just a wonderful spring seasonal, slightly higher alcoholic German lager. All right, last but not least, this is the echt Schlenkeler Rauchbier, Vastenbach. Again, say that one a few times. So this is a smoked beer from the Schlenkeler brewery. If anybody that knows smoked beers, this is definitely the leading brewery. Fastenbier is a beer you could probably guess it's for the fasting period, and it's created to be drank between Ash Wednesday and Easter. It's a Bock beer that was originally started by the Berliner brewery, a double Bock, and this brewery created this style of beer that was meant for the monks to help them survive the fasting period. So the beer is a little bit higher in alcohol, usually around like 8% or so, to keep them warm in the colder spring nights. And it's a double malt bill, hence the name Doppelbock. And that was intended to be a lot more nutritious and to keep their bellies full, if you will. So this is a variety brew with the Schlenkeler brewery, as they do with all their beers. It's made with smoked malts. This particular one is a combination of their light malt, which is non-smoked, and their heavily smoked darker malts. You could certainly the aroma is incredibly smoky, as well as the flavor. It's still a lager. The malts are roasted and smoked, so it's a little bit darker and smokier. And it's certainly a beer that has an acquired taste. And I feel like for most folk, the first sip or two can be a little bit rough, as it's so intensely smoky. But once your palate kind of gets used to that flavor and starts picking up the smoke a little bit better, it certainly becomes a lot easier to drink. These beers, all beers by the Schlenkeler brewery, are stored and matured in their ancient cellars beneath the brewery that have been around since pre-Middle Ages, which is certainly a brewery that I highly recommend visiting if you're ever in the area in Bamberg. And the entire town is kind of known for their smoked beers, with this brewery just definitely being the leading brewery for smoked beers. So it's a little bit higher alcoholic lager with a very intense smoky flavors. We have their Helles lager, or their light colored lager, here in bottle pretty much at all times, which is one of my favorite beers. It's light and easy to drink. They actually don't use any smoked malts for that particular beer, but they brew it in the same old copper kettles as their very, very smoky beers, so it just picks up a hint of that smoke. Any of these beers pair wonderfully well with our sausages and any other meat products, like our half chicken and sorts.